Cameras have to be on, no matter what. Fine by me, don't mind the pump, by user Happy Giraffe. I am a project manager and data scientist. I manage lots of different public health related projects. There is one project in particular that includes a really demanding team from a federal government department. I recently returned back to work from maternity leave. I work in my office 3 days a week. On those days, I have to pump breast milk at regular intervals for my baby. Luckily, I have my own private office and can usually just keep on working, emails, reports, etc., while I pump. I have a hands-free, wearable pump which is convenient, but still definitely obvious if I am wearing it. It pokes out about my shirt and is not exactly silent. Recently we have a Zoom call scheduled during one of the times I needed to pump. Instead of missing the meeting, I figured I would just keep my camera off so I could wear my pump and still participate and listen. Heck, I was even in my office and not working from home. I felt like I was being a pretty committed employee. Meeting starts, a few people have their cameras off. The lead makes the announcement, I just want to remind everyone that our expectation is that you will have your cameras on because this is not a virtual meeting, it is a simulated in-person meeting, whatever that means. I sent a quick private message to explain I was paying attention, but pumping, no response to me, just instead, again, the expectation is that all cameras will be on. So fine. I turn my camera on for this meeting of about 20 people. The camera isn't aimed at my chest but certainly the top of my pump is clearly visible. I unmuted myself, so you could also clearly hear the pump, and just said, "Thank you for your patience, I was adjusting my breast pump." The meeting continued awkwardly, with several other team managers letting me know privately it was fine to turn my camera off, but at that point, there really was no point in turning it off. At the most recent meeting, the announcement was, "Please turn on your cameras if you are comfortable doing so." Hearing aids is not equal to earbuds, by user MaliciousCompliance. This happened a few years ago, around the time I was 17. I had just started working at a smallish cafe run by a well-known family in our area. I knew some people who had worked there before and they told me for the most part the owners were great, very chill and laid back when it was slow and normally weren't bad about breathing down the employees' necks. Their oldest daughter who also helped run everything was the one who was very peculiar, and we'll call her Karen. I am officially diagnosed with a hearing deficiency, not enough to be considered deaf, but more than hard of hearing, so I wear hearing aids. My first day before we opened, my co-workers asked me if they could do anything else to help me out, and we eventually started talking about the hearing aids in general. While talking about everything I mentioned they had Bluetooth capabilities so I could play music through them. Not that I would, but I could. Karen had been in the room at the time, and said you can't wear those, no earbud policy, and tapped on the policy's paper on the wall. I protested, explaining they're hearing aids and not earbuds, and that I wouldn't be using them to listen to any music while I was working. Her reasoning was I didn't need them because I wasn't considered fully deaf, and I was doing this to get around the no earbud policy, directly quoting when I said they could play music. I can't wear them? Okay, let's see how this goes. Placed them into the case in my bag and started my shift. I couldn't understand my trainer, couldn't hear the customers, couldn't hear when orders were called to be sent out. Things were going extremely slow, a couple of warmed pastries burnt since I wasn't able to hear the timers. Simple sentences had to be repeated multiple times with people basically yelling at me just for me to be able to piece a few words together. I guess the cherry on top was me ignoring one of the owners when she tried speaking to me. Karen came up to me and tried addressing me about it, until she finally realized what was going on after she had repeated herself 5 times. By the end of that shift, I was allowed to wear my hearing aids, no questions asked. Malicious compliance to malicious compliance, by user practical.advice. I run a repair shop where I employ a bunch of local kids, ages 16 plus, to learn skills and make some money while we generally sit around and talk about the world while we fix things. We had a client come in with a busted electronic, we fixed it up for her and gave her a decent discount on the work. Her final bill for parts and 4 hours of labor was $100 even, discounted down from $220. She didn't like the bill. She didn't like the work. She claimed that we'd broken something else. She claimed that the kid who did the work didn't know what she was doing. She did, and I had supervised her, and that the kid who helped her in the front room was rude to her. He wasn't, but she didn't like the little pride flag pin he was wearing. She demanded to see the manager, so I popped out, listened to her tear into my kids, validated how she was feeling, but pointed out that the work she had asked for was done correctly, and her bill was due on pickup of the piece. The last straw for her came when she pulled out a credit card and I had to inform her that we don't accept that particular card. She literally asked me, "Do you know who I am?" Which I didn't, still don't care, and I told her we'd take a personal check. She wrote out a check, problem solved. I deposited the day's checks, and got a note from my bank that one had bounced. Her check, of course. I called her the next day to inform her that her check had been returned for insufficient funds, and that she'd need to come in and pay her bill, plus the extra fee for a returned check. All of these fees, just to point this out, were clearly outlined on the service agreement she'd signed, and we'd already discounted her $120, just to be nice. Anyway. She rolls up into the office carrying a bag, and I knew exactly what was going on. She drops, of course, a bag of pennies on the front desk. She's breathing heavily, we're on the second floor and she'd taken the stairs, and she announces triumphantly that she's here to pay her bill. She just needs to go get the rest of our hard-earned money, said with a sneer, of course. The kid at the front desk looks like he's about to cry, so I stop working on the thing I'm working on and take over. How many more bags do you have? I ask her, and she says that the nice people at the bank loaded them up in her car. She didn't count them. I told her that was fine, we'd wait for her to bring them all up and then settle up her bill. She was expecting a bigger reaction, I think, either that or she hadn't thought this through. 10,000 pennies, plus the extra $25, weighs a lot. And she'd just committed to carrying them through a parking lot and up a flight of stairs. One of my kids, bless his heart, offered to help her carry them. She refused. Finally, shaking and sweaty, she deposited the last of the bags on the countertop. The pennies were loose, not in coin rolls. She'd done some work to prove her point. What she hadn't counted on was that we'd need to count the pennies. While the other kids took care of other clients and fixed things in the back, the front desk guy and I counted up the pennies. She started to realize that this was going to take a while, and tried to leave. I told her that she couldn't leave until we'd signed off on her bill, since at this point she was in violation of her service agreement and had passed a bad check. We couldn't just take her word for it, and I would inform our local constabulary if she left without paying. I was kinda talking out of my ass, but she'd managed to tick me off a little. The other clients in the shop came and went, and we counted. Phone calls came in and were handled by my kids, and we counted. She sat down in a chair, folding steel, not super comfortable, stood up again, walked around the office, and we counted. After a while, she said just forget it, and took out $125 in bills. We signed off on her agreement and she started to leave. Another one of my kids, bless his heart, asked her if she wanted help carrying the pennies back to her car. She looked at all of us with a face of sheer panic, mumbled no, thank you, just keep them, and bolted. The whole shop was silent for a moment. Then one of the kids started giggling, and nobody could stop. People coming in thought we'd gone nuts, and I finally had to banish everybody to the back room until they could breathe again. We loaded the bags into my vehicle, we used the elevator she'd walked by a few times, took them to the bank and used the coin machine to deposit them, then wrote out a donation to our local shelter for the amount she'd dropped off. She posted something nasty on Facebook about it and got ratio D. She had, of course, posted earlier about what she was going to do and she got called out with her own post. My favorite response was something like, "You said you were going to pay your bill in pennies, you paid your bill in pennies, what went wrong? Please don't pay your bills in pennies, folks. Especially if you're just doing it to be a dick." I'm not a restaurant either, by user stereo and cooking beacon. I just saw the post where Op's home number was one digit off from a Chinese restaurant and thought you might enjoy my story. Back in the day, we moved into a new town and on the first night discovered that the phone company gave us the phone number of a Chinese restaurant that had closed 6 months earlier. Literally dozens of times each Friday and Saturday night, our phone rang from people who had the old menus, back when there were paper menus. I figured if I just told everyone they closed, it would only be a couple weeks before the calls stopped. Narrator, the calls continued for months. This is how the calls went. Me, every time I answered the phone, "Hi, China Blossom closed." Wrong number. 8 out of 10 callers, "Oh, sorry." Bye. 10% of callers, "What? Why did they close? When did that happen? Do you know another good Chinese place? They really closed? Hey, they were real good. So did they convert the restaurant to apartments or something? What's that like? Note, I was not living in an abandoned Chinese restaurant, I just had their old number. But the other 10%, oh that other 10%. Hangry jerk, no they did not close. Me, yes, sorry, they closed. Hangry jerk, no, I just drove by today. You're open. Cut it out and take my order. Me, they closed. Bye. Hangs up. Hangry jerk calls back and I answer because for reasons I needed to answer my phone and this was before you could screen calls. Me, seriously, stop calling, they closed. Hangry jerk, just fucking take my order. I know you're open. Me, sure, what can I get you? HJ, orders. Me, you want fried rice with that? Okay, 45 minutes. 45 minutes later when the person is sitting in an empty parking lot outside a closed restaurant, the phone rings. HJ, what the fuck? There's no lights on. The door is locked. Where's my food? Me, I told you they closed. Click. Customer's shake isn't milky enough, by usage sir. TL, DR at the bottom. Years ago I used to work at a popular ice cream joint. The job was pretty chill, co-workers were fun to be around, and the pay was alright for a teenager. But, as with every other food service job, the customers made the experience a whole lot worse. Always had the regular annoyances, people yelling at you for long wait times, orders being wrong, etc. Even had a guy get up on the counter and berate me because we were out of bananas for banana splits. But, one experience really stood out from the others. We had a regular customer who would come in no shit, every day, to get a strawberry shake. He was fine with long waits, or if our card machines were down. But, this dude would summon the might of Satan if his milkshake wasn't made with enough milk in it. Worse, he would sit there and wait until you remade it to his liking. Stupid store policy made us remake any order for free if the customer wasn't happy with it. One day this dude comes in, and orders guess what? A strawberry milkshake. I was working the ice cream bar, so filled with defeat I started making his order. Company recipe was 3 scoops of ice cream for a regular smoothie, since I knew this guy liked his milky, I only put 2. I handed it to him, and went about the next orders, until 5 minutes later he comes back and screams at me that the milkshake wasn't milky enough. Now, every time in the past, I always made his this way, 2 scoops to give it that milky consistency. This time I guess he wanted to just fuck with me. At this point I had had enough, the day had been rough as it is, so I really didn't want to handle this, especially since I could tell with the shit-eating grin he had plastered on his bastard of a son face, that he was trying to make my day worse. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. I decided to make the milkiest milkshake possible, but while still being a milkshake by technicality. I went back to my station, and started the concoction. I didn't put 2 scoops, I didn't put 1 scoop. I put 1 tablespoon of strawberry ice cream, and filled it up to the brim with milk. After the pointless blending, I handed him the milkshake he didn't want, but the one he deserved. I watched him with my own shit-eating grin beaming back at him, while he tried his milkshake. He took a sip, and immediately started berating me that it was just milk. I told him no sir, I put strawberry ice cream in there, just as you asked. I could see the rage in his eyes as he demanded his order be remade. I then politely informed him, our store policy only lets you have your order remade once for free. His face burned bright red as he muttered something under his breath, then stormed out the door, slamming it behind him. Every time after that, he never asked for me to remake his order. A few months later, I got a better job where I didn't have to deal with angry customers. TL, DR, customer wanted milkier milkshake, I made him one with a tablespoon of ice cream, and watched him storm out the door.